Ukraine's general prosecutor. His name was Viktor Shokin. Okay? Bad guy. Everybody says bad guy. I don't know. He seems like a bad guy, and also some good things he was doing. But he was investigating a Ukrainian company that Biden's son was involved with. We all heard both sides of the story. Biden claimed what he did was purely based on Shokin's corrupt conduct and nothing to do with this. Except, one thing that bothers me is this meeting. This meeting where you sent the people back home and they all said, you didn't want us to look into that. And then Mr. Joe Biden comes in and he gets this guy fired. This is something that's probably worth looking at. This is a document of the sworn statement of the guy Joe Biden got fired that was recently obtained by the investigative journalist John Solomon. John Solomon is an award-winning investigative journalist that for 30 years worked for the Associated Press, the Washington Post, and the New York Times. He was fine then. He's outed people on both sides of the aisle. But all of a sudden, he's a conspiracy kook. This statement was made in a separate court case involving another Ukrainian citizen. We'll get to that. But here's what Shokin states. He said when he was fired, there had been no complaints about his work, and that Biden never specifically accused him of any criminal offenses. He then goes to say on the record in a sworn court statement, and I want to quote the paragraph, the truth is that I was forced out because I was leading a wide-ranging corruption probe into Burisma Holdings, a natural gas firm active in Ukraine, and Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was a member of the board of directors. I assume Burisma, which was connected with gas extraction, had the support of the Vice President Joe Biden because his son was on the board of directors, end quote. Now, this is the relationship and power that the Obama administration had over Ukraine. Why? Because we were dumping money. And it was Joe Biden and Barack Obama that were the sugar daddies. Shokin, their equivalent of our attorney general, said that Obama was, quote, telling the heads of the Ukrainian law enforcement system how to investigate and whom to investigate. And Shokin had another unforgivable sin on his record because he launched an investigation. This is just comedic at this point. He was investigating the Anti-Corruption Action Center, and it's spelled CENTRE, so you know it's credible. It's got the fancy foreign center. Shokin alleged that the NGO might have improperly diverted or even, dare I say it, embezzled millions of dollars. So wouldn't we really want to know? Because it's our money. Wouldn't this be an unforgivable sin to Obama and Biden? Yeah, gosh darn it. If it wasn't that the financiers, the two top financiers of that year, are the International Renaissance Foundation and the U.S. government. Now, I've never heard of the International Renaissance Foundation before, so we had to do some investigating. Now, guess who the other main donor is of this group? You got it. George Soros. Spooky dude. You can't do it. Apparently in America or the world, you cannot do a chalkboard without this guy showing up. In March 2016, things began to change. Here's what happened. Oh, by the way, in March 2016, he gets fired and bank made another accounting error. We lost $2.2 million and $1.8 billion in an IMF loan that you and I guaranteed. Where did I put the other 1.8? In March 2016, the good guy takes over. Now, who is the good guy? Lutsenko. He takes this guy's place. And everybody in the Obama administration says, he's great. He's the best. This guy bad. This guy good. So he gets in. But wait, there's more. Also, the same month, what happens? But Paul Manafort, like honestly a gift from the gods for the Democrat, decides, you know what? I'm going to go into the Trump team. Bing, bing, bing. They've been setting him up. How did this happen? So he goes in the Trump team. Well, they're excited about this, of course. And Chalupa, remember, she's on the Democratic payroll. She starts working directly with the Ukrainian embassy in the U.S. She's working with the staff to raise alarm bells regarding Manafort to the Ukrainian president. She said the embassy, quote, worked directly with reporters researching Trump, Manafort, and Russia to point them, quoting, in the right directions. This is the Ukrainian embassy here in the United States working with a DNC operative. Does any of this sound like what they accused Donald Trump of doing? Working with a DNC operative to damage the Republican candidate for president to influence the election. Now, I said I wouldn't give you any opinions, but do I need to? Chalupa and the DNC deny this, but the Ukrainian embassy political officer who worked there at the time stated that the Ukrainians were indeed working with Chalupa. Here's the quote. They were coordinating an investigation with the Hillary team on Paul Manafort with Alexandra Chalupa. Now, remember, phone a friend anytime you need help. They're all there. Is this that big of a stretch? Especially when you find this, which was released on WikiLeaks, between Chalupa and the former DNC communications director, Luis Miranda. In this email, she just checks in. And she reports, she says, a lot more coming down the pipe. She went to the Open World Society Forum. I don't want to read this to you exactly. She went to Library of Congress specifically to talk about Manafort. And she says, they put me on the program, I'm quoting, to speak specifically about Paul Manafort. And I invited Mike Isikoff, who I've been working with for the past few weeks, and connected him with the Ukrainians. Now, gosh, that sounds familiar. Remember, they're accusing Rudy Giuliani of doing this with John Solomon. Except they don't have things like this. I invited Isikoff. I've been working with him the past few weeks, connected him to the Ukrainians. More offline tomorrow, since there is a big Trump component you and Lauren need to be aware of that will hit in the next few weeks. Something I'm working on you should be aware of. Now, what's weird is Isikoff wrote a story for Yahoo News and detailed some of the things in the Steele dossier. The Steele dossier, the leaked dossier, went to Isikoff. And then what's weird is it also kind of showed up with the FBI, and it was used as corroborating evidence to justify a FISA warrant for Carter Page, so we could find out about Donald Trump. Because remember, this is released, and the Democrats at the same time, they hire Fusion GPS to get to the bottom of Donald Trump. 1 month after the DNC hired Fusion GPS to work on the dossier. Oh, and by the way, Mrs. Orr was working here, and she's married to Bruce Orr, who's with the DOJ, and the little pillow talk. She accidentally said a few things that were coming out of Fusion GPS, which happened to come right out of the DNC with Chalupa. And so now he's coming around and going, wait a minute here. Where is the media on this? Where are they? Where were they? Where are they now? The DNC was colluding with the Ukrainian embassy to influence our election, but nobody cares. Do you see why the president might be a little testy? Maybe. The work the Ukrainians and the DNC and Chalupa were doing together actually prompted Senator Chuck Grassley to write a letter to Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. But, as you might guess, no one was really interested. Nothing happened. Wow. Okay, so here we are. The Isakov member. She's working with the Ukrainian embassy and the press. They've got Fusion GPS. They're starting to move it into the DNC or to the DOJ. And then the FBI again says, you know what? You guys are so fantastic. I love your work you're doing or not doing, as the case may be. We want an official partnership with you. We want, wedding bells were heard, the FBI and the Anti-Corruption Bureau in Ukraine to work hand in hand. Now, holy cow, now they can share any information back and forth. It's kind of like that wall that we had for 9/11. That wall came down. And now if the Ukrainians had something, get right to them. Okay, so that brings me now to the Black Ledger. Remember we were talking about the Black Ledger here? Trump opposition research, and she's like, hey, I got a guy named Paul Manafort. Forget Tony Podesta and Tad Devine and all of that. I got this guy, Manafort. So the Black Ledger on Manafort was released. And you're going to love this. Now, only in the end will you understand. Still at the beginning of this story, but it has a great ending. So the Black Ledger was released by Ukraine's Anti-Corruption Bureau, both occurring directly in the heat of the U.S. election. Now, the Black Ledger refers to financial records that were kept by this guy, the former Ukrainian president. He used this for the under-table payments. Now, remember, he's working to get him reelected, and so are these two. So another person that is involved in this is a Ukrainian parliamentary member named Lyshenko, okay? And he is also working, remember the guy who's running the anti-corruption thing? These are the two that put the Black Ledger together, all right? These two signed a memorandum of understanding with the FBI just months prior. They jointly released pages in the letter that showed illegal payments were given to Paul Manafort. Now, this is kind of crazy because on the same day that these guys are nailed, just within days, if not hours, of this coming out, and Paul Manafort going to jail, dude, Tony Podesta, who was doing the same thing with the same people in the Black Ledger, he just decides to close his shop. This is one of the biggest firms for lobbying in the United States of America. Tony Podesta is John Podesta's brother. All those Clinton, the Clinton connections and everything. Did I lose my? There it is. All of those things, nobody paid attention. He just decides to retire and close his shop. Wow. And nobody questions that. Nobody thinks it's weird. The guy working on the same thing that he gets busted for by these guys, he closes shop the same time. Wow, I'd have a question or two if I were in the media, but I'm not really. Now, some have questioned whether the ledger is even authentic. I'm not going to do that. Whether it was forged or not doesn't change the fact that Manafort had been a target of the DNC, and they had been after him with Chalupa for months. The Ukrainian embassy was working with the DNC to get this information. And now, in an absolute surprise, during the U.S. election, the Ukrainian government decides with the anti-corruption guy who's in bed with all of these people that they're going to release that bombshell out of nowhere. whether the ledger